This is a full story. Puppy wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. On our 7th wedding anniversary, I found the plane tickets that Rockey had hidden in the drawer. I thought he was planning a surprise for me, but by the evening, all I got was a message saying he had to go on a business trip. I lay awake with insomnia, and while scrolling, I came across a post from his first love, Serena. 18-year-old wish list, watching the northern lights in Iceland with the one I love, finally achieved today. The photo was of Serena kissing Rockey under the northern lights. I didn't cry or message him to confront him. After trailing him for so many years, I was truly exhausted. When Rockey came back, I had just placed the last dish of spicy shrimp on the table. I used to love spicy food, but Rockey couldn't handle spice. Since we were together, I hadn't made a single spicy dish. But now, I suddenly didn't want to compromise anymore. Rockey placed a necklace on the table. It was the pink diamond necklace I had hesitated to buy for a long time. He pressed his lips together and said, "7th anniversary gift." I forgot because I was too busy with work the day before yesterday. It's okay. I picked up a shrimp without looking up. Rockey stared in surprise, his words stuck in his throat. He looked at me, expecting that I would, as before, cry with grievance and relentlessly question him. I also thought I could never be so calm about Rockey's infidelity. On our 7th anniversary, I looked at the tickets in the drawer, and my heart suddenly raced with an inexplicable sense of anticipation. The destination was Iceland. Going to Iceland to see the northern lights was a place we had planned to visit on our honeymoon. At that time, he was busy with work, and we kept postponing it until now. I thought it was Rockey's surprise for me. I prepared a whole table of dishes and lit candles, waiting for Rockey to come home. But when he came back in a hurry, he didn't even glance at me and went straight to the bedroom. When he came out, he dropped the line, "There's something to handle at the company, I have to go on a business trip," and left. He took the tickets from the drawer. It turned out he wasn't going to Iceland with me. It turned out he forgot that today was our 7th anniversary. I stared at the carefully prepared candlelit dinner on the table, losing all appetite. I leaned on the sofa, looking at the silver white outside the window, feeling a bit tearful. After a long time, I still couldn't sleep. I opened blog and saw a post. It was from Rockey's first love, Serena. The location was Iceland. The caption read, "18-year-old wish list, watching the northern lights in Iceland with the one I love, finally achieved today." The photo showed Serena kissing Rockey under the northern lights. The phone fell to the ground with a thud. It turned out Rockey went to Iceland with Serena. I should have guessed. I sat dumbly in the cold living room, unable to sleep all night. Why are all the dishes spicy? Rockey sat down, ready to eat, and frowned at the table full of spicy dishes. "I thought you wouldn't come back." I put down my chopsticks and prepared to go to my room. He grabbed my wrist, looking at me with complex emotions, and after a while said, "Haley, are you leaving just like this?" I looked back in confusion. What else should I do? Should I cook a late-night snack for him after his overtime, like before? Just as I lay down on the bed, my phone rang with a message from my boss. "Haley, knowing you as I do, I need to confirm again. Have you really decided to transfer to the UK? Although I really hope you go, but you've rejected me many times for Rockey. And I'm a bit worried, so I'm confirming with you again. I smiled wryly and replied, "Don't worry, boss. I've truly made up my mind this time." A year ago, the company established a branch in the UK, and the manager position had been vacant. The boss had mentioned it many times, saying it was a rare opportunity and that I should definitely transfer. I was tempted for a long time. Transferring would not only mean a promotion, but also a doubling of my salary. But the only thing I couldn't let go of was Rockey. When Rockey was young, his mother left him to go abroad, and his father didn't care much for him. When his father moved him next door to my house, he was only 11. It was New Year's Eve, and he sat alone quietly at the door. When I went out to set off fireworks, I saw his small figure huddled in the corner, enviously watching the fireworks in the sky. Noticing I was looking at him, Rockey lowered his head and returned to his indifferent expression. I looked at his thin figure and remembered how my mother had spoken sadly about his situation in the morning. I suddenly felt a pang of sympathy. "Do you want to set off fireworks with me? I'm afraid to do it alone." I handed him a sparkler. He looked up in surprise and took it. We set off fireworks together, and in my peripheral vision, his tightly pressed lips turned slightly upward. Later, I persistently dragged him to my home for the New Year's Eve dinner. He only returned home after his father came back drunk from gambling. During those teenage years of intense self-esteem, I walked with him until we went to different universities. Rockey suddenly cut off contact with me. It wasn't until the year we graduated from university that I came home and saw him waiting under the streetlight downstairs. I watched the figure walking toward me slowly, and in a daze, everything around me seemed to freeze. His clear, youthful features slowly aligned with the memory of him. Haley, long time no see. Long time no see. I looked at him, unsure of what to say. He suddenly leaned down and kissed me. My heart stopped for a moment, then started pounding wildly. Rockey separated after a long time, then looked into my eyes and asked, Haley, will you be my girlfriend? I swallowed hard. Yes. I regretted agreeing so quickly, but he clearly knew I had a crush on him. He did it on purpose. So, almost naturally, we got married. I remember when I told him I needed to move abroad for work, he was silent for a long time. That night, he drank a lot, looked at me with red-rimmed eyes, and murmured, Haley, are you going to leave me too? Later, I was afraid to remind him of the sadness of being abandoned by his mother, so I never brought it up again. But in the end, it was I who was left behind. I bit my lip, my heart slowly tearing apart. Noticing something was wrong, my boss cautiously asked, Is there something going on between you and Rockey? I didn't reply, which was a tacit acknowledgement. After a while, she sent another message. Flowers bloomed forward, and people moved forward. Haley, trust your own choice. I'll book a ticket for the end of the month, and when you get there, I'll give you a month off to clear your mind. When Rockey walked in with the pink diamond necklace, I suddenly remembered I had left it aside and hadn't bothered with it. In the past, whenever he gave me a gift, I would put it on immediately and take a few photos to share on social media. But now, the gift had lost its sense of anticipated surprise. He lay down beside me and softly asked, Should I put it on for you? I shook my head. No, it's inconvenient to wear it to work. Seeing I wouldn't play along, Rockey lost his patience and tossed the necklace aside. Haley, is it really necessary? Are you still angry about what happened last time? I already explained, didn't I? We just drank too much at the party and fell asleep there. Besides, the other 3 brothers were there. What could happen between Serena and me? He didn't mention it, but I had almost forgotten how foolish I had been before. Last time, when he went out for a gathering with college friends, he didn't come home all night. I was so anxious I couldn't sleep, searching for him everywhere. In the end, I found him at his usual club. As soon as I entered, I saw Serena sleeping in his arms. I didn't care that there were others around. I had a big argument with him. Rockey dismissed it lightly, saying he got drunk. His friends also tried to persuade me. Yes, Serena and we have been friends for so many years. We consider her one of us, purely platonic. But during the gathering, I often heard them teasing. You two are still so in sync. Why not get back together? I cried all the way home. Rockey initially tried to comfort me. I really only see her as a friend, and nothing happened. Later, he impatiently threw out, If there was something between us, how would there be a you? Can't you stop making a fuss? We fell into a cold war. On our 7th anniversary, I thought it was his way of making amends, but it turned out to be the last straw. Coming back to reality, I looked at Rockey's irritated face and calmly said, You're overthinking it. Then I continued to look at my phone. Rockey seemed taken aback, not expecting his usual lines to come from me. Are you really not angry? He frowned at me, seemingly in disbelief. Angry about what? I looked up and replied flatly. Rockey was momentarily stunned. His face suddenly darkened, and he stood up angrily, saying, I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, before leaving with a dark face. I was puzzled. Not getting angry, not being jealous, not probing. Isn't this what he wanted? The next morning, Rockey surprisingly cooked. He brought the century egg and lean meat congee to the table, calling me over. Awake? I made your favorite century egg and lean meat congee. Come and eat. I was momentarily stunned. Because no one cooked for him when he was young, he had to cook for himself. After growing up, he almost never cooked again. I could understand. He probably didn't want to revisit the awkward memories of his childhood. After we were together, I always did the cooking. The only time he cooked was when I had a minor surgery and was in the hospital. He made the century egg and lean meat congee for me. It was the best I had ever tasted, and later, I would occasionally ask him to make it again. But he coldly responded, If you want to eat it, why not just buy it outside? Why do you need me to make it? At that time, I thought it might remind him of the bad memories, so I quickly apologized and never mentioned it again. But it wasn't until I saw Serena's blog that I knew. During college, he had cooked countless times for Serena. Because Serena couldn't eat cafeteria food, he specifically rented a place with a kitchen and cooked for her daily. Later, when Serena returned to their circle, he was the one who cooked at every gathering because Serena liked his cooking. That night, I torturously scrolled through Serena's blog, feeling the love in her words like a thief peeking into someone else's romance. But that love should have been mine. Rockey came over, put his arm around my shoulder, pulled out my chair, and said with rare tenderness, Haley, I'll spend these days with you. Didn't you say you wanted to see that singer's concert? I'll book tickets and go with you, okay? I found it a bit laughable. He had already seen it but pretended not to know. Some time ago, a singer I had loved for many years finally came to my city for a concert. I eagerly grabbed tickets and asked Rockey to go with me. He said he had work that day and couldn't make it. Yet Serena posted on that day, "Which busy person still made time to go to the concert with me? Turns out it's my man." The photo showed them holding hands in front of the stage. The photo even revealed a faint wedding ring mark on Serena's well-defined ring finger. I didn't respond and continued eating. Rockey wasn't angry. He just took out his phone and started looking for tickets. "If you don't say anything, I'll take it as a yes." But he searched for a long time without finding the singer's concert. I glanced at his phone's wallpaper and said with some sadness, "His tour ended this year." Rockey's fingers on the screen froze, his mouth slightly open, unsure of what to say. After a while, he looked at me with a hint of guilt in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Haley. I'll definitely go with you next year." I smiled, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. "You said the same thing last year." The air in the room instantly grew tense, leaving only the ticking of the wall clock. I ignored his increasingly pale face and calmly said, "I'm going to work." I thought Rockey would sulk and give me the silent treatment as he had before, but suddenly, he seemed to change his attitude and sent me a message saying he would pick me up from work that evening. I didn't think much of it. He had stood me up for Serena more than once. Once, when I was running late and asked him to drive me to work. Serena called, saying she hadn't had breakfast and was feeling low on blood sugar, asking if he could bring her breakfast. After hanging up, Rockey stopped the car, his voice full of concern and urgency. "Take a cab to work. Serena has fainted from low blood sugar before, so I need to bring her breakfast first." He stepped on the gas and disappeared from sight. I stood under the scorching sun, sweat dripping down my forehead. My heart felt like it was plunged into icy water, with coldness spreading throughout my body. Not to mention that I couldn't get a cab at that hour, and I hadn't had breakfast either. That day, I nearly fainted from heatstroke when I arrived at work, and my boss took me to the hospital. So, I had already lost hope in him. But when I went downstairs, I actually saw his car. As I got closer, I saw Serena in the car. She was sitting in the front seat with her long, smooth legs resting on Rockey's lap. There seemed to be a cut on her ankle, oozing a bit of blood. Rockey was looking down, gently applying medicine to her wound. Serena winced in pain and said, "It hurts so much." Rockey glanced at her and, though his tone was reproachful, his voice was filled with undisguised tenderness. "I told you to be careful." Though he was scolding her, his tone couldn't hide his concern. My nails dug into my palms, hurting fiercely. Even though my heart had long been dead, it still felt like it was being stabbed with needles. Half of my youth had been given to Rockey, but my true feelings were trampled underfoot. A car passed by, honking its horn. Hearing the noise, Rockey finally looked up, and upon seeing me, he hesitated and explained awkwardly, "Serena accidentally fell, and since I was passing by, I picked her up. I was just applying medicine to her." Serena casually removed her leg from Rockey's lap and chimed in, "Yes, Rockey was just applying medicine. Haley, don't misunderstand." She winked at me playfully, her eyes full of smug provocation. I felt disgust churn in my stomach. Passers-by glanced over, their eyes shifting between Rockey, Serena, and me. Rockey, seeing the uncomfortable looks and my unmoved stance, urged, "Get in the car." I walked over, threw my wedding ring at his face, and said clearly, "Let's get a divorce." Rockey was stunned when the ring hit him, and by the time he reacted, I had already turned and walked away. He slammed the car door and strode after me, grabbing my wrist tightly and gritting his teeth. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" "Yes." I pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared earlier and handed them to him. Rockey suddenly lost his temper and tore the papers to shreds. "Playing the divorce game again? I've already said she was injured. I just happened to give her a ride. Is that something you have to hold against me? You keep threatening me with divorce, and I'm really fed up." Serena also ran over, with red eyes, and tried to grab my hand. "Haley, you've really misunderstood the situation with Rockey. We're just friends now. If it bothers you, I can walk back by myself." I shoved her away in disgust, shouting, "Don't touch me." Serena staggered and nearly fell. Rockey, distressed, caught Serena and yelled at me, "It's just a seat. Is it forbidden for anyone but you to sit in the passenger seat? Haley, what are you really upset about?" "What am I upset about? It's simply the blatant favoritism." In the end, Rockey pulled Serena's hand and coldly said, "Get in the car. If she wants to make a scene, let her. Let's see how long she can keep it up." Then he drove off with Serena. The sky suddenly darkened, and lightning and thunder roared across the sky. I walked in the pouring rain, heading in the opposite direction. This was indeed not the first time I had mentioned divorce to Rockey. The day Serena returned to the country, he left me to pick her up. When I saw his phone, I discovered that Serena was his first love. We fought violently. I accused him of being unclear and boundaryless with his ex. He questioned why I had snooped on his phone and why I was so paranoid. In a fit of anger, I mentioned divorce. He didn't comfort me and didn't come home for several days. I felt scared and helpless, crying for several days. In the end, I was the one who compromised, apologizing for snooping on his phone and doubting him over baseless things. He knew I loved him enough that he was confident I wouldn't leave him. But this time, the disappointment had accumulated enough. Rockey, just like before, stayed away for several days. I was content, tidying up my things bit by bit in preparation for going to England at the end of the month. Until on the third day of his absence, Rockey's friends called me, unusually. Sis, Rockey is drunk. Could you come pick him up? No, we're in the middle of a divorce. It's not convenient. Rockey keeps calling your name. Sis, are you really not coming? You must have heard wrong. Last time he was drunk, he called Serena's name. There was suddenly the sound of a bottle smashing on the floor. I calmly hung up the phone. It wasn't until I opened the door in the morning and saw Serena that I realized Rockey was with her last night. She covered her mouth as soon as she saw me, looking embarrassed. Haley, I didn't want to trouble you, but Rockey threw up all over himself, so I had to come help him with a change of clothes. I asked him to come back, but he wouldn't. I can't do anything about it. Please don't blame me. She deliberately pulled at her clothes, revealing a hickey on her neck. I fought back my disgust. What? Are you proud of being a mistress? Haven't you learned about decency and integrity? Serena's expression changed instantly. She suddenly pushed me and walked inside. I was with Rockey first. This should be my house. Only the unloved are mistresses. You have no right to say anything about me. My head hit the door frame, becoming red and swollen. She had pushed me with such force that my vision blurred. I turned around, grabbing her collar and trying to push her out, when Rockey suddenly came back. He stood in front of Serena, shielding her, and looked at me coldly. Is this never ending? You've bullied me once or twice. Try touching her again. Apologize to Serena. I opened my mouth, but before I could curse him out, tears began to fall. I bit my lip hard, pushing them away. Get out, both of you, get out. I slammed the door shut and crouched behind it, sobbing uncontrollably. Not long after, the door was forcefully pushed open. Rockey burst in, anxiously grabbing my shoulders and carefully inspecting me. Are you injured? Why didn't you say anything? He took out some ointment from his pocket and gently applied it to my wounds. I pushed him away and grabbed the ointment, hurling it at his head. I don't need your feigned concern. You're my wife. How is my concern feigned? I said I want a divorce. Don't you understand? He looked hurt and shouted at me, seeing my cold gaze, utterly confused. Just because I helped Serena with her wound, you want a divorce? Fine, I admit I handled this poorly. I didn't consider your feelings. I'm sorry. What more do you want? Can we agree to keep our distance from Serena from now on? He grew angrier and finally punched the bathroom door with a force that bruised his hand. I looked at his angry face in the mirror. I suddenly realized that all these years, I never truly understood him. He thought that as long as I didn't see him in bed with Serena, he could act as if nothing happened and accuse me of overreacting from a moral high ground. He only wanted me to give in, to continue loving him while pretending nothing was wrong. I couldn't stop trembling, and tears fell uncontrollably. Rockey softened his expression, raised a hand to wipe my tears from my cheek, and softened his tone. All right, Haley, we've been together for so many years. We're the most important people in each other's lives. Don't talk about divorce and hurt my feelings, okay? This time, it's my fault. I promise it won't happen again, okay? He always does this, hits me and then gives me a sweet reward. Every time he does this, I'm helpless against him, but this time, it doesn't work. I raised my head, tears in my eyes, and looked at him. Rockey, if within a week, Serena contacts you and you don't reach out to her, I won't bring up the divorce again. A smile appeared on his face. Is it that simple? I nodded. Yes, it is simple, but I know he won't be able to do it. Rockey started coming home early. On the first day, he brought me a bouquet of my favorite Lysianthus. On the second day, he canceled a party to have hot pot with me, my favorite. On the third day, he accompanied me to the gym to work out together. On the fourth day, we had a meal at home, cooked by him. On the last day, I called Serena. She showed up an hour late, looking exquisite with her makeup done. She opened with a sneer. Why aren't you at home managing Rockey? Instead, you have time to meet me? Is this a warning to stop contacting Rockey? There's no use finding me. I don't control his social life. She laughed lightly, her tone dripping with concealed smugness. It was as if she was saying, I'm here to steal your husband, and what can you do about it? I suddenly raised my hand and slapped her. The surroundings fell silent, leaving only the crisp sound echoing in the air. Serena covered her face, stunned, and looked at me in disbelief, grinding her teeth. How dare you hit me? I calmly wiped my hand and said, you went on a trip with my husband and kissed him. Shouldn't I hit you? Her face turned pale, and then she sneered. Just now realizing? My blog was for you to see. Matters of the heart can't be secured by a single piece of evidence. I sipped my coffee and looked at her indifferently. As you wished, Rockey and I are preparing for a divorce. Seeing the smirk slowly appear on her lips, I continued. But he doesn't agree. I told him that as long as he doesn't contact you within a week, I won't bring up divorce again. Today is the last day. Watching Serena's disappointed and unwilling expression, I stood up and smiled at her. Let's see if you have the ability to make him break our agreement. I'll be watching. Serena shouted at my retreating figure. Haley, just you wait. In the evening, Rockey still arrived home punctually. Perhaps knowing tonight was the final day of the deadline I mentioned, he was in particularly good spirits. He hugged me from behind and gently said, Haley, let's go to the restaurant where we had our first date. Let's celebrate our 7th anniversary, shall we? At the restaurant, we were seated at the same table as back then. The warm yellow light softened the harsh lines of his face. In a daze, he seemed to turn back into the youthful version of himself. Back then, he watched me cut the steak and laughed softly. Haley, you're still so cute. He took the knife and fork from my hand and expertly cut a piece of steak, feeding it to me. I always knew Rockey was smart. After leaving his original family, he used his expertise to start his own business while still in college. After graduating, he opened his own company, achieving financial freedom and leaving behind the struggles of his past. He was also quite romantic, pulling out a bouquet of red roses from somewhere. Roses for the beauty, to celebrate our first date. When I came to my senses, there was a bouquet of red roses on the table, just like back then, and the same set meal. Enjoy your meal, the waiter said. Music began to play, the lights dimmed, creating a perfect atmosphere. Rockey's phone suddenly rang. Without looking, I knew it was Serena. He looked a bit flustered and hit the end call button. She called back persistently. I took the hint and got up. I'll go to the restroom. Rockey seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and nodded stiffly. All right. When I came back, I heard Serena's tearful voice. Rockey, why haven't you been answering me? You still care about me. Don't touch me. Go away. Rockey's voice tightened as he asked urgently. Serena, where are you? What happened? I'm at a bar. A man keeps harassing me. I'm so scared. I'm really so scared. Rockey, come pick me up. Rockey hurriedly grabbed his car keys and was about to head out, but he turned and bumped into me. He pressed his lips together, avoiding my gaze. Haley, I'm sorry. Serena is in danger at the bar. She's there because of me. I can't just ignore her. I'll take her home and then come back to have dinner with you. He added. I asked, do you really have to go? You promised me. Rockey looked at me, fell silent for a moment, and a layer of ice slowly formed in his eyes. Haley, I remember you're very empathetic. Why can't you show a little more compassion to someone in danger? All right, I promise I'll come back as soon as I drop her off. With that, he quickly ran out the door. Before getting into the car, he glanced back at me through the glass window. I waved goodbye to him. He closed the car door, started the engine, and disappeared. I sat back down and calmly finished my meal. Back home, I took out the printed divorce agreement and placed it on the bedside table, picked up the suitcase I had packed earlier, and left. On the plane to England, I received a text and photo from Serena. In the photo, Rockey and she were lying together, their bare shoulders exposed. You lost. He's sleeping next to me. He won't be coming back tonight. Hurry up and divorce him. You can't compete with me. She triumphantly declared her victory. I smiled. She had won, but I hadn't lost. I saved the photo to my phone and sent it to Rockey. Sign the divorce agreement. Then I blocked all his contact information. When Rockey woke up, he saw Serena lying next to him. He was startled and quickly got up. He couldn't remember how he ended up sleeping with Serena. He clearly remembered planning to leave after dropping her off at home. But last night, Serena suddenly hugged him from behind, crying, Rockey, will you stay with me a little longer? I'm still so scared. I know you want to go back to Haley. Just stay and have one more drink with me, and I won't bother you again. A little voice in his head screamed at him to refuse. He had promised Haley he would return to have dinner with her. He had forgotten their 7th anniversary last time. He couldn't break his word again. But Serena's trembling hands and pitiful cries were overwhelming. He sighed and gently patted her back. I'll stay a bit longer, but I really have to leave soon. Haley is still waiting for me. He told himself this would be the last indulgence. After this, he would stay by Haley's side. but after drinking, he couldn't remember what happened. When he woke up again, he was in Serena's bed. A strange panic surged in his heart. He recalled Haley's expression when he left last night. No grievances, no anger. Just calmly waving him goodbye, as if accepting that this might be their final farewell. This thought flashed by, and it was as if countless mosquitoes were buzzing in his mind, gnawing at his heart. Rockey hurriedly dressed and stumbled out, rushing to find Haley. The countless red lights on the road seemed to keep pulling him further away from Haley. He grew increasingly anxious. It's all right. Haley has always loved him. She's only ever loved him in her life. She wouldn't stay angry with him for long. At worst, he would just have to pamper her a little more this time. When Rockey got home, he immediately noticed that the house was unusually clean, almost as if something was missing. He couldn't bring himself to imagine what it could be. Rushing into the bedroom, he prayed that Haley was still asleep, but the bedroom was empty. The neatly made bed still looked like it had been arranged by Haley just that morning. She hadn't returned all night. His body trembled slightly as he searched every corner of the house, but there was no sign of Haley. Or rather, there were no traces of Haley. He finally realized what was missing: Haley's belongings. Rockey's heart felt as if something had tightened around it, sending sharp pain throughout his body. He took out his phone, intending to call Haley, but the phone had run out of battery and shut down. He ran to get the charger, tripping over his own haste, and struggled to crawl to it. While waiting for the phone to power on, he felt his body tense up, his breathing growing more frantic. Anxiety felt like a sword hanging over his head, ready to fall at any moment. The sword eventually fell. A message, a photo, sealed his fate. He picked up the divorce agreement on the bedside table, already signed by Haley, and stared at it for a long time. A hot tear fell onto the paper, blurring the ink. He sank to the floor, his expression one of pain and regret. No, Haley wouldn't be so heartless. Rockey tried to comfort himself. He would apologize to her, explain things, and she would forgive him. After all, she had always been soft-hearted. But he couldn't reach her anymore. Haley had blocked him. He frantically ran to her company, only to learn she had been transferred and left for England the night before. He immediately recalled a year ago, when Haley excitedly told him about her promotion and asked if he wanted to move to England with her. Rockey admitted he was somewhat petty. He didn't want to go abroad like his mother, nor did he want her to leave him. That was the first time he showed his vulnerable side to Haley. Indeed, she had been hurt for him and never mentioned it again. But now, she no longer cared for him and had left him behind. Rockey asked hoarsely, when did she plan to go abroad? A month ago. A month ago. It was the date of their 7th wedding anniversary. So, she had already made plans to leave him back then? He closed his eyes in pain and suddenly slapped himself hard. After arriving in England, everything went smoothly. Work proceeded in an orderly manner, the rented house had a large yard, and the neighbors were lovely. I thought Rockey would take the opportunity to reconcile with Serena, but instead, he came to London. After work, I saw Rockey waiting at my doorstep. In the month since I'd last seen him, he had lost a lot of weight, with dark circles under his eyes, and appeared utterly disheveled. He was a far cry from the confident person he used to be. He used to be very conscious of his image. This version of him felt unfamiliar. Suddenly, I was overwhelmed with mixed emotions. There was no sense of revenge or bittersweet sorrow. What I felt more was a profound sense of loss, as if something irretrievable was gone. As he walked towards me, I avoided him and opened the door to go inside. He suddenly grabbed my wrist. Haley, I'm sorry, it's not what you saw. Please let me explain. I pulled my hand away and shook my head. It doesn't matter. You know, it wasn't just because of that last incident. Throughout our 7-year marriage, he had always been indifferent, never bothered to explain much. Now that I was exhausted, he had traveled across the ocean to explain the very things he was most reluctant to do before. His face turned pale, his voice choked with emotion. It matters. You can't condemn me to death just because of a photo. I sighed, noticing people passing by. Forget it, come inside and talk. Rockey followed me inside, anxiously saying, Haley, that night, nothing happened between me and Serena. She drugged my drink, took off my clothes, and took those photos. If you don't believe me, I can confront her in person. Really? Perhaps seeing my consistently cold expression, Rockey's eyes reddened with desperation. I know I shouldn't have gone that night. I was wrong, Haley. I promise it won't happen again. Let's be together again, okay? If you want to stay in England, I'll stay with you. I looked at him with disappointment in my eyes. Only that once? The suppressed anger in my heart nearly exploded. What made him believe he could gamble on the idea that I only knew about that one incident, that he could deceive me? Rockey hesitated, looked away, and nodded. I took out my phone, opened Serena's blog, and displayed the photos of them kissing under the aurora, along with their past moments. Rockey, Do you think I'm particularly foolish? Do you know how happy I was when I saw the 2 tickets hidden in the drawer on our 7th anniversary? I thought you were planning a surprise, but it turned out to be a huge deception. When you kissed her under the aurora, what were you thinking? Did you remember that Iceland was our honeymoon destination? Back then, you said you were busy. Were you truly busy, or just watching the aurora with your first love? You've always had her in your heart. Why did you come back to me after graduating from college? You knew I liked you all along, suddenly cut off contact, and then returned to ask if I wanted to be with you. Did you see me as a backup? I stared at him with blurred vision, the dull pain in my chest turning into sharp knives, as all the sadness and hurt of these years surged out like a tide, suffocating in its intensity. Rockey's face drained of color, his mouth opening slightly, but he couldn't refute a single word. He looked at me with endless pain, guilt, and regret in his eyes. It's not like that, Haley. I love you. Serena was just a youthful rebellion. I'm now absolutely certain that the person I love is you. Please give me another chance to make it right. He looked at me with almost pleading eyes, full of desperation. Prideful as he was, this was the first time he had bowed to me. But it was too late. I looked at him calmly, smiling lightly. But I don't love you anymore. Rockey was struck dumb, standing there in a daze, mumbling. It can't be. You can't stop loving me. How could you suddenly stop loving me? I looked at him coldly, unable to believe his pain and struggle. It wasn't that he loved me so much or couldn't let go of me. It was just that I had loved him for too long, and he found it hard to accept. Let's part on good terms. Don't disturb my life anymore. You're free now. You can go love the person you truly care about. I glanced at the time, signaling that he could leave. After leaving him, I picked up my old hobby from college, skydiving. Before being with him, I had always been someone who loved new experiences and adventures. I was always curious and passionate about life, full of vitality. Later, growing disappointment and inner turmoil eroded my innocence and passion. Rockey wouldn't leave. He said he couldn't live without me. I laughed in anger. When we were together, he was often away for 10 days or more, and now he claimed he couldn't live without me. Where was this feeling before? I called the property staff to take him away. After arriving in England, I joined a local skydiving training camp. After a few trial jumps, I gradually regained the old sensation. The instructor told me that there would be a skydiving competition in the camp in a week, with generous prizes. I signed up without hesitation, even though I might only receive a participation award. It would be a chance to jump over a coastal town and see different scenery. On the day of the competition, I wore a stylish purple smoky makeup and received a lot of exaggerated but sincere compliments. While waiting in the sky, I felt both nervous and excited. The brief freefall, accompanied by the whooshing sound of the wind and the cheering of the crowd. Then came the steady flight like a bird, and at that moment, it felt like having a divine perspective, with a view of the blue sea and scattered houses. After landing, I took off my helmet, and the instructor placed the second-place medal around my neck. Haley, I'm proud of you. I exhaled deeply and gave him a big hug. Before I could catch my breath, I saw Rockey walking towards me with a bouquet of flowers. His eyes flashed with surprise, and his voice carried a hint of excitement. Haley, you're amazing. I didn't know you could skydive. And your makeup today is special, very beautiful, and suits you well. He handed the flowers to me, gazing at me almost greedily. One of the bystanders widened her eyes and came over, asking, Haley, who is he? I replied in front of him, he's my ex-fiancé who's still entangled with his first love. The bystander immediately rolled her eyes, pushing Rockey aside with a bouquet almost as tall as me. Haley, congratulations. Such flowers are worthy of you. I couldn't help but smile, took the flowers, and thanked her. Thank you. With that, I left with the flowers, not looking at Rockey again. He caught up, grabbing my wrist, his voice trembling. Haley, I've cleared things up with her. She won't bother us anymore. Please, don't be so harsh. Today was my day of winning. I didn't want to hear his confession on such a wonderful day. So, I shook off his hand, flipped my hair, and interrupted him. Sorry, I have a date. No time for your long-winded speech. I didn't expect Rockey to be so persistent. He bought a house nearby and moved in. Perhaps my repeated softening over the years made him think that if he held on a bit longer, I would eventually forgive him. I shook my head helplessly and didn't give him another glance. He wasn't discouraged at all, standing at my door daily with flowers and gifts as if he were courting me again. Because of this, I even avoided sunbathing in the yard. Until my neighbor Peter came back from a trip and brought me local specialties. Rockey, fuming, followed him in, his eyes fixed on Peter and me, angrily asking, Is he the person you went out with that day? Are you two together? How far have you gone? After his outburst, he closed his eyes in agony and asked in a hoarse voice, You're getting back at me, aren't you? I held back my anger and looked at him coldly. don't think of me as filthy as you. We're not divorced yet, and I still have basic decency and moral sense. He deflated immediately, forced a bitter smile, and said, Haley, please don't talk about me like that. I finally understand your feelings now. I was such a jerk. Well, you know what to do, just sign the divorce agreement. I felt no emotion inside and interrupted him coldly. Rockey fell silent. After a long time, tears fell from his eyes. Do I really have no chance at all? I looked at the person I once loved deeply. What's done can't be erased. I can't blind myself to the cracks between us or pretend that nothing happened. Rockey's tears broke free, and he choked out, I'm sorry, Haley. He signed the divorce agreement, turned, and slowly disappeared from view. I watched his lonely figure blend into the setting sun. Youthful times also faded with the sunset. 2 years later, I was promoted to the general manager of the branch office. Looking at myself in the mirror, I appeared even more vibrant than 2 years ago. People often mistook me for a student from a nearby college. I was very satisfied with this state. Whenever I had a holiday, I traveled the world to see the scenery I hadn't seen before. While watching the sea in the Maldives, I suddenly received a message from a friend back home. Hey, it's really karma. After Rockey returned, Serena harassed him for 2 years to marry her, but he never gave in. A few days ago, Serena suddenly went mad, ran him over with a car, saying that way he'd never leave her. She was arrested by the police that day, convicted of intentional injury, and Rockey is still in the hospital with no friends visiting him. Finally, my friend hesitated. Haley, do you want to go back and see him? I smiled. I'm traveling the world. If I happen to visit his city, maybe I'll see him. The clouds reflected in the sea quietly drifted away. Time and I kept moving forward. Only Rockey and Serena remained in place. The end. If you like Puppy's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.